The whispers started the moment his ship entered the system. Every delegate at the Harmony Summit felt the change in the air, felt the sudden tension that rippled through the crowded halls of Station Meridian like a cold wind across still water. "The Void Reaper is here," a Torvan ambassador hissed to his aide, his 4 eyes widening with fear. "Why would they send him?" A Melith diplomat asked, her bioluminescent skin flickering with distress. "This is a peace summit, not a battlefield." Commander Kang Deho walked through the station corridors alone, his boots making no sound on the polished floors, his face revealing nothing of his thoughts, and everywhere he passed, aliens pressed themselves against walls to avoid him. He had earned his reputation through blood and fire across 3 separate wars, and the galaxy remembered every battle, every victory, every world that had fallen silent after his fleet arrived. Children of 100 species learned his name as a warning, as something to fear in the darkness between stars. But none of them knew the truth. None of them saw the exhaustion that lived behind his eyes, the weight of names he carried in his memory, the faces that visited him in dreams. He could never escape a Deho. Entered the main assembly hall and found a seat in the far corner, away from the other human delegates who represented Earth's diplomatic corps, and he sat with his hands folded, waiting for the summit to begin. He had come here hoping for something he had never found in combat peace, not for the galaxy, though he wanted that too, but for himself, for the part of him that had grown so tired of being the monster everyone expected him to bait. Hall filled slowly as representatives from 47 species took their designated places, and translators hummed with activity, and holographic displays showed the agenda for the 3-day summit. Deho watched them all and wondered if any of them could look at him and see a man instead of a weapon. That was when he noticed her. She sat among a group of Keth delegates, laughing at something one of them said, her dark hair pulled back in a simple style, her clothes practical rather than formal, and the Keth around her leaned close with obvious affection. Dr. Yunsora. He knew her name from reports, from news feeds that celebrated her work across the galaxy, from stories that painted her as everything humanity could be at its best. She had spent 15 years living among alien species, healing their sick, learning their languages, earning their trust in ways no diplomat ever had. Where Deho brought fear, Sora brought hope. Where he ended conflicts with violence, she prevented them with understanding. He was still watching her when the lights went out. Emergency alarms screamed through the station as blast doors slammed shut across every corridor, trapping everyone inside the assembly hall, and armed figures emerged from maintenance hatches in the walls and ceiling. They wore no insignia, no identifying marks, but their weapons hummed with deadly energy. "Nobody moves," a voice commanded, and the translator rendered it in every language simultaneously. "You are now hostages of the Silence Collective, and your lives depend on your cooperation." Deho's hand moved toward the sidearm he was not carrying, and he cursed himself for following summit protocol and leaving his weapons aboard his ship around him. Aliens screamed and cowered, and some tried to run, only to be struck down by stun blasts that left them twitching on the floor. The terrorist leader stepped forward, a tall alien with scales the color of ash and scars that crossed his face in jagged lines. And when he smiled, his teeth were sharp as broken glass. "I am Veth," he announced, "and I speak for all those the great powers have silenced, for all those crushed beneath the weight of empires, for all those who died so that you could sit in your comfortable chairs and discuss peace." He raised one clawed hand and gestured toward the exits. "The station is sealed, and antimatter charges have been placed at 12 structural points, and if anyone attempts rescue or escape, this summit becomes a tomb." Deho forced himself to remain still, to think instead of act, to calculate the odds that seemed worse with every passing second. He counted 30 terrorists with weapons, Plus, however, many more waited in the corridors outside. And he counted nearly 300 hostages with no means of defense, even if he could fight. Even if he could somehow reach Veth and break his neck before the others reacted. Dozens would die in the crossfire, maybe hundreds. He had killed before when the math demanded it. But the math had never demanded this, so he sat motionless while his reputation screamed at him to act. While every instinct built through decades of warfare demanded blood and across the hall. Dr. Yun Sora rose slowly to her feet. "Some of your people are injured," she said to Veth, her voice calm despite everything. "I am a doctor, and I can help them if you allow it." Veth studied her with cold eyes. "You are human." "Yes, humans have taken much from us." "I know," Sora said. "And I am sorry for that, but I am also a healer. And your wounded need care, and your hostages need someone to keep them calm. And I can do both if you let me." For a long moment, Veth said nothing. Then he nodded once. "You may move among them, Doctor, but know that my soldiers will be watching. And if you try anything clever, I will kill 10 hostages for every moment of trouble you cause." "I understand," Sora said. And she picked up her medical kit and walked toward the nearest injured delegate without hesitation. Deha watched her work. Watched her speak softly to a Melith whose arm had been burned by a stun blast. Watched her clean and bandage wounds with hands that never trembled. She moved through the crowd of hostages like light through darkness. And everywhere she went, the panic seemed to ease just a little when she passed near his corner. Their eyes met for just a moment. He expected fear. Expected the same revulsion he saw in every alien face. Instead, she looked at him as if she was trying to solve a puzzle. As if she saw something in him that others had missed. Then she moved on. And he was left alone with his thoughts. An hour passed, then 2. And Veth made his demands through a broadcast that reached every ship in the system. He wanted political prisoners released. Wanted reparations paid. Wanted public acknowledgement of crimes committed by the great powers against smaller species. The demands were impossible. Designed to fail. Designed to give Veth an excuse for the violence he clearly wanted. When they refuse, Veth announced to the hostages, "I will begin executions, 1 every hour until they understand we are serious. And I will start with the humans. Because humans have earned this more than anyone." His scarred face twisted into something like pleasure. "I will start with their famous healer," he pointed at Sora, "and then I will end with their famous monster." He pointed at Dahon in that moment. Their fates became intertwined in ways neither of them could have predicted. Veth circled Sora like a predator examining prey. His scarred face twisted with hatred that had been building for years. "Do you know why I chose to start with you, healer? Because you want to hurt the humans most, and killing me will hurt them more than killing a soldier would." "Clever," Veth admitted. "But not quite right, because I chose you because you represent everything I despise about your species. This idea that humans can make up for their crimes with kindness, that they can wash away blood with medicine and good intentions." He grabbed her chin and forced her to look at him. "Your people destroyed my world. Healer, burned my colony to ash, killed everyone I ever loved. And no amount of bandages will fix that." Sora did not flinch, did not look away, did not show any fear at all. "Which colony?" The question seemed to catch Veth off guard. "What?" "Which colony? Because humans have been involved in many conflicts, and I want to understand what happened to you." "You want to understand?" Veth laughed, a harsh and bitter sound. "Fine, I will tell you. I will tell everyone, so they can see what monsters humans truly are." He released her chin and turned to address the assembled hostages. 12 years ago, the human military received intelligence about a small colony on the edge of Torvan space. And they claimed this colony was producing weapons, claimed it was a threat to galactic peace, claimed they had no choice but to destroy it. His voice cracked with old pain. They sent their fleet, and they burned everything. The factories and the homes, the schools and the hospitals, the children who had never hurt anyone. All of it reduced to ash because humans decided we were dangerous. He pointed at the corner where Deho sat with his head bowed, and they sent him to do it. The Void Reaper himself, their greatest killer, their proudest monster. Every eye in the hall turned toward Deho, felt the weight of their stares, felt the hatred and the fear and the grim satisfaction of those who had always known what he really was. And then Sora spoke. "Commander Kang, is this true?" He could have stayed silent, could have let her think whatever she wanted, could have hidden behind the reputation that had protected him for so long. Instead, he raised his head and met her eyes. Yes. The word fell like a stone into still water. I commanded the fleet that destroyed that colony, and I gave the orders that killed everyone who lived there. And I have carried their names with me every day since. Veth's scarred face split into a triumphant grin. You see, healer? You see what your people really are? But Sora was not finished. Commander, why did the military target that colony specifically? Because of what they were building there. And what were they building? Deho closed his eyes, remembering reports he had studied until he could recite them in his sleep. Remembering the calculations he had made when there were no good choices. Only terrible ones. Bioweapons, he said. Specifically engineered to target human DNA. Designed to cause sterility across entire populations. Meant to end our species within 3 generations without firing a single shot. Silence filled the hall. That is a lie. Veth snarled. Human propaganda to justify murder. The colony was funded by the Helix Concordat. Deho continued, his voice flat and tired. They wanted humans gone from the galaxy. And they did not care how long it took. And when we discovered what they were doing, we had days to act before the weapons would be distributed to 100 worlds. Lies, Veth repeated. But his voice had lost some of its certainty. We tried negotiation first, Deho said. We tried warnings, we tried blockades, we tried everything we could think of. And they responded by accelerating production, by preparing to launch early, by forcing us to choose between their colony and the survival of our entire species. He looked at Veth with eyes that held no anger, only exhaustion. I made the choice, and I have regretted it every day since. Because you are right that children died there. And you are right that I am a monster for ordering it. But if I had to make the same choice again with the same information, I would make it the same way. Sora stood slowly, and nobody stopped her. Veth. I've worked with the Torvan government for years, and their archives are extensive, and if what the commander says is true, there would be records. Records can be falsified. Then let us check, Sora said. Let the Torvan delegate access the historical databases. Let him verify or disprove these claims, because if humans truly committed unprovoked genocide, then the galaxy deserves to know, and if there is more to the story, then you deserve to know that too. Veth hesitated around the hall. Hostages were murmuring to each other, and Deho could see doubt spreading through the crowd. Could see aliens who had been certain of human evil now questioning what they thought they knew. What are you afraid of, Veth? Sora asked gently. If your cause is just, the truth will support it, and if the commander is lying, the records will prove it, so why not look? It was a masterful play. Deho realized Sora had turned his confession into an opportunity, and used the worst moment of his life to create doubt, to buy time, to advance whatever plan she was building, and she had done it without lying, without manipulation, without anything except the simple power of asking questions. Veth stared at her for a long moment, and Deho could see the conflict in his scarred face. The war between hatred and the terrible possibility that his hatred might be built on incomplete truth. Fine, Veth said at last. Let the Torvan check. Let everyone see the records. Because when they confirm what I already know, your death will be even sweeter." He gestured to the Torvan delegate Sora had spoken with earlier. "Access the archives, find the truth, and show these humans what they really are." The Torvan's eyes flickered as his neural implants connected to station systems. And Deho saw something in that flicker that made his heart beat faster. Delegate was doing more than searching archives. He was accessing other systems too. Systems the terrorists did not know about. Systems that might give them all a chance to survive. And Sora had made it happen with nothing but questions and a lifetime of trust. Dea looked at her with new eyes and wondered if perhaps the Galaxy's greatest terror had finally met something stronger than fear. 3 days after the crisis ended, the Harmony Summit reconvened. The delegates gathered in the same hall where they had been held hostage, and the scorch marks on the walls served as reminders of how close they had come to disaster. Deho sat in his corner and waited for the inevitable. It came quickly. "Commander, Kang must leave this summit immediately," the Hareth representative announced. "His presence is disruptive and unwelcome, and we cannot negotiate in good faith while the Void Reaper watches from the shadows." Several delegates voiced their agreement, their translator devices creating a chorus of rejection in every language. Deho stood and prepared to go. He had expected this, had known from the moment he arrived that his reputation would poison any chance of real peace. And perhaps it was better this way. Perhaps the galaxy could heal faster without his shadow falling across it. Wait, the voice came from the Keth delegation, and it belonged to a woman Deho did not recognize. Until she stepped forward, it was the mother of the child who had crawled through ventilation shafts to save them all. "My daughter is alive because of what happened in this hall," she said. "Not because of soldiers or weapons or military force, but because a human woman asked her for help. And my daughter trusted that woman because she had earned that trust years ago." She looked at Deho with eyes that held no fear. "And my daughter told me something else. Something she overheard through the vents while she was carrying messages. And she told me that the Void Reaper sat quietly while others fought. That he surrendered his reputation to give Dr. Yoon the time she needed. That he chose to be weak so that others could be strong." Murmurs spread through the assembled delegates. The Tovan representative stood next. "Commander Kang's confession during the crisis allowed me to access station systems under the guise of searching archives. And without that cover, I could not have disabled the security lockouts that let our rescuers enter." The Melith diplomat who had organized her people rose from her seat. "Dr. Yoon Sora built the network that saved us. But she built it around the commander's stillness, around his willingness to be seen as defeated, around his choice to trust a woman he had never met instead of fighting alone as he has always done." One by one, the delegates who had participated in Sora's impossible alliance spoke up. They did not defend the Void Reaper. They did not excuse his past or minimize his crimes. Instead, they spoke of choices, of the moment when a man known only for violence chose something different, and then Sora herself walked to the center of the hall. "I have spent my entire life believing that humans can be more than our worst moments," she said. "I have healed aliens who hated my species, learned languages that had no words for human kindness, built relationships across barriers that everyone said could not be crossed." She turned to look at Deho with those steady, fearless eyes. "And in that crisis, I watched the galaxy's greatest terror make himself small so that others could be large. Watched him confess his deepest shame so that I could buy time. Watched him choose trust over violence in a moment when violence would have been so much easier." Her voice carried to every corner of the hall. "Humans are both things, both the monster and the healer, both the destroyer and the builder. And we choose every day which one we will be. And Commander Kang made his choice in that hall. And I am asking you to let him make it again. The delegates fell silent. The Melith elder, ancient and respected, rose slowly to her feet. "Commander," she said, "what do you choose to be now?" Deho walked forward until he stood beside Sora, until he could feel the warmth of her presence next to him, until he could see his own reflection in the eyes of aliens who had feared him his entire life. "I choose to learn," he said. "I choose to help. I choose to build instead of destroy. And I am asking if there is a place for me in that work." He looked at Sora. "Doctor, Yoon has been building bridges across the galaxy for 15 years. And her missions take her to dangerous places where trust is not enough to keep her safe. And I am offering to go with her, to provide protection for her work, to use the skills I have for something other than war." The hall erupted in discussion, delegates debating a dozen languages. And Deho stood quietly and waited for their judgment. It came an hour later. The summit would continue, and Commander Kang would be allowed to remain. And a new initiative would be launched under Dr. Yoon's leadership. A medical and diplomatic corps that would bring healing to the most troubled regions of the galaxy, with the Void Reaper as its guardian months later. Deho sat on a balcony overlooking an alien world where they had just helped establish a new hospital, where children of 3 species played together in gardens that had been battlefields a year before. Sora sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Do you miss it?" she asked. "Miss what?" "Being feared, being the Void Reaper, being the monster that made entire systems surrender without a fight." Deho considered the question carefully, considered the man he had been and the man he was becoming, considered the weight he still carried and the new purpose that made it bearable. "No," he said at last. "I only regret the years I spent alone, believing that was all I could be." Sora leaned against him, and her warmth was the most human thing he had felt in decades. "The galaxy called you a terror," she said. "And you called me by my name," he replied. "You looked at the monster and saw a man, and that changed everything." She smiled. "And it was like watching a star being born." "Deho." "Yes?" "I think we are going to do good work together." He looked out at the children playing in the gardens, at the hospital rising against the alien sky, at the future they were building one choice at a time. "I think so too." And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Commander Kang Deho, the galaxy's greatest terror, felt something like peace. The Torvan delegate worked in silence while the entire hall watched, his 4 eyes moving rapidly beneath closed lids as his implants processed data streams that only he could see. His paced like a caged animal, his certainty cracking with every moment that passed. And throughout the crowd of hostages, things were happening that the terrorists did not notice. The Keth child had returned through the ventilation system, passing messages to delegates she crawled past. Messages from station security forces who were repositioning outside the sealed doors. Melith diplomats flickered their bioluminescent skin in patterns too subtle for other species to read, coordinating movements and positions throughout the Hala hearth. Engineer had quietly disconnected 3 of the antimatter detonators from their power sources. Moving with glacial slowness to avoid detection, Sora had built an army out of trust. And now that army was preparing to strike Adea. Watched it all unfold and felt something he had not experienced in decades of warfare. He felt like a passenger his whole life. He had been the one making plans, giving orders, deciding who lived and who died, and now he could only sit and watch, while a woman with no weapons and no soldiers accomplished what his entire military career could not. It was humbling. It was also beautiful. The Torvan delegate opened his eyes. "I have found the records," he announced, and his voice was heavy with something that might have been regret. The colony designated Ash-7 was indeed a production facility for biological weapons. Weapons designed to target human genetic markers. Funded through intermediaries connected to the Helix Concordat. Veth's scarred face went pale. No. The records show multiple diplomatic attempts by human authorities to resolve the situation peacefully, all rejected by colony leadership. And final satellite imagery confirms accelerated weapon production in the hours before the attack. No, that cannot be right. You must have accessed falsified data. These records are stored in Torvan archives, protected by encryption that humans cannot breach. Verified by 17 independent sources across multiple governments. The delegate's voice was gentle but firm. The attack on Ash 7 was a terrible thing, but it was not unprovoked. Veth stumbled backward as if he had been struck. "My family," he whispered. "My children. They died because the leaders of that colony chose to build weapons instead of seeking peace," the delegate said. The humans who attacked were not innocent, but they were not entirely guilty either. And the truth is more complicated than any of us wanted to believe. The hall had gone completely silent. Dea saw pain on faces throughout the crowd. Saw aliens struggling with revelations that challenged everything they thought they knew. Saw the simple narrative of human evil crumbling under the weight of complex reality. And he saw Veth breaking. The terrorist leader had built his entire purpose around hatred, had constructed meaning from his suffering by finding someone to blame. And now that foundation was cracking beneath him. "It does not matter," Veth said, but his voice had lost its strength. "Humans still killed them. Humans still burned my world. Humans still took everything from me." "Yes," Sora said softly. And she stepped toward him with no fear at all. "And I am sorry, Veth. I am truly sorry for what you lost. Because no records or explanations can bring back the people you loved." She reached out and touched his arm. And he flinched but did not pull away. "I have spent my life trying to heal the wounds between species, trying to build bridges across the gaps that war and hatred create. And I know that some wounds cannot be healed. Some losses cannot be recovered. Some pain goes too deep for any medicine." Tears were streaming down Veth's scarred face. "But killing us will not heal you either," Sora continued. "It will not bring them back. It will not fill the emptiness. It will only add more names to the list of the dead and more pain to a galaxy that has already suffered too much. Then, what do I do?" Veth asked, and he sounded like a lost child. "What do I do with all this hatred?" "You let it go," Sora said. "Not for their sake, but for yours. Because carrying it has been destroying you. And the people you loved would not want that. Would not want you to become a monster in their names." Veth looked at her with eyes that held decades of pain, and then he looked past her. "At Deho, at the monster who had killed his family. Do you regret it?" The Askedea stood slowly and walked forward, ignoring the weapons that tracked his movement, ignoring the danger that surrounded him on every side. He stopped in front of Veth and let the terrorist see his face. Really see it, without the mask of the Void Reaper. "Every day," he said. "Every single day, I wake up with their names in my head, with their faces in my memory, with the knowledge that I chose to end them. And I will carry that until I die." "Then why?" Veth demanded. "Why did you do it?" "Because I was afraid," Deho admitted. "Afraid of what would happen if I did not act. Afraid of the billions who would die if those weapons spread. Afraid of making the wrong choice, and in the end, I chose the fear I could live with over the fear I could not." He had never spoken these words to anyone. He had never admitted the terror that had driven him, the desperate calculation of a man facing impossible options. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," Deho said. "I do not deserve forgiveness, and you do not owe it to me. But I am asking you to stop, to let these people go, to choose something other than more death." Veth stared at him for a long moment, then he dropped his weapon. "Stand down," he said to his soldiers, and his voice cracked with exhaustion. "It is over." The terrorists hesitated, confused by the sudden surrender, and in that moment of hesitation, Everything changed. Station security forces burst through maintenance. Hatches that the Kethchild had unlocked. Melith diplomats tackled the merest armed terrorists with coordinated precision. The Arath engineer triggered emergency systems that flooded half the room with stunning gas, and Sora's impossible alliance, built from trust and hope and years of connection, brought the occupation to an end without a single additional shot fired in the chaos. Deho stood motionless beside Veth, two broken men surrounded by the wreckage of their choices, and Sora stood with them, holding them both together as the world shifted around them. Sora kept working as if she had not just been sentenced to die. She moved from hostage to hostage with her medical kit, checking vitals and treating injuries and speaking in languages that Deho did not recognize. And the aliens responded to her with trust that seemed impossible under the circumstances. He watched her from his corner and tried to understand. The Void Reaper had commanded fleets and conquered worlds, had broken enemy lines and shattered enemy hopes. And yet he could not do what this woman did so easily. She touched a trembling Kethchild on the shoulder and whispered something that made the little one stop crying. She argued gently with a Torvan elder who refused treatment until younger delegates had been seen first. She made a Melith diplomat laugh despite everything, actually laugh, and the sound rang through the tense silence like a bell. How did she do it? How did she make them forget their fear? He was still wondering when she knelt beside him, pretending to check him for injuries. "You are thinking too loudly, Commander," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. "Every terrorist in this room is watching you because they know what you can do. And if you keep calculating attack vectors in your head, they will notice. How do you know what I am thinking? Because I have worked with soldiers before. And you all get the same look when you are planning violence." She pressed a scanner against his wrist as if taking readings. "Right now I need you to look defeated, look broken. Give them a show. What are you planning? Something that requires time, and I cannot get that time if they think you are about to explode." Her eyes met his, steady and unafraid. "Can you trust me?" Nobody had asked him that question in years. Nobody had needed to. Because everyone knew that Commander Kang Deho trusted nothing and no one except his own judgment and his own skills. But something in her gaze made him hesitate, made him reconsider, made him wonder if perhaps there was another way. "What do you need me to do?" "Slump your shoulders, lower your head, look like a man who has given up," she said. The great Void Reaper, brought low at last, no longer a threat to anyone, and while they are busy enjoying your humiliation, I will be building something they will never expect. "What?" "An alliance." She moved away before he could respond, continuing her rounds through the hostages. And Deho slowly let his posture change, let his head drop, let himself look like the broken man she needed him to bait. Was not entirely an act from across the hall. Veth noticed the change and smiled his sharp-toothed smile. "Look at the monster now," he called out to his soldiers. "Look at how small he becomes when he cannot hide behind his weapons and his fleet, when he must face the consequences of what he has done without the power to escape them." The terrorists laughed, and some of the hostages looked at Deho with something like satisfaction. Pleased to see the Void Reaper brought low, he accepted their contempt because Sora had asked him. 2 hours passed. Sora continued her work, speaking to delegates in their own languages, building connections that the terrorists did not understand because they saw only a doctor doing her job. But Deho watched carefully, and he began to see the pattern. She touched the Kethchild on the head and whispered something. And moments later, the child slipped away toward the back of the hall, where ventilation grates lined the lower walls. She spent extra time with a Torvan delegate, whose implants allowed him to interface with station systems. And when she left, the Torvan's eyes had changed, had become focused in a way they had not been before. She bandaged a Melith diplomat's minor wound with excessive care. And afterward, the Melith's bioluminescent patterns shifted subtly, communicating something to others of her kind across the room. Sora was building a network right under the terrorists' noses. Using trust she had spent 15 years earning. Using relationships that cross species and cultures and histories of conflict, and nobody noticed except Deho. Because everyone else was too busy watching the defeated monster in the corner when Sora passed near him again. He spoke without moving his lips. "The child, where did you send her?" "To find help, to reach parts of the station the terrorists have not secured, because there are always gaps in any occupation if you know where to look." "And the Torvan?" "He can access station systems through his neural link, but he needs time and distraction, and you are providing both." "The Melith?" "Organizing her people, because Melith can communicate through light patterns that other species cannot rid. And right now she is coordinating everyone I have spoken to." Dal felt something unfamiliar stirring in his chest. "Hope, you have done all this in just a few hours?" "I have been building this my whole life." "Commander," Sora said, "every patient I healed, every language I learned, every world I visited, and every friendship I made, it was all preparation for moments like this. Because I always knew that someday the galaxy would need to work together. And someone would have to show them how." She looked at him with those steady eyes. "You conquered worlds through fear, and I connected them through trust. And now we will see which approach serves us better." Before he could respond, Veth's voice cut through the hall. "Enough waiting," the terrorist leader announced. "Our deadline has passed and no response has come. So it is time to show the galaxy we are serious." He strode toward Sora with murder in his eyes. "Bring me the healer." Two terrorists grabbed Sora's arms and dragged her toward the center of the hall. And Deho's hands clenched into fists. And every instinct screamed at him to act, to fight, to do something, but Sora caught his gaze and shook her head once. A tiny motion that only he could see not yet. She was saying, "Trust me." Oh, he stayed in his corner while the woman who had given him hope was forced to her knees before a killer. And he prayed to whatever gods might listen that she knew what she was doing.